Imagine someone gave you a treasure map. So you open up this treasure map and someone points out to you that dot right there, that's a treasure. Are you willing to go there? Yeah, sure. Is the treasure really there? The treasure is right there, my friend. As long as you go to this spot marked out on the map, you're gonna find heaps of gold and diamonds and jewelry. And all I ask from you is that you give me 5% of whatever you collect. The rest is for yours to keep. You're then thinking that, well, this is a pretty sweet deal. I'm just going to go down to this spot on the map. And by the looks of it, I can even drive for most part. And then, so you start driving in a car, you're following the map directions, and you're like, this is like taking candy from a baby. Perhaps you're 100 miles in. Oh yeah, this is so chill. Couple of hours work, couple of hours driving, and a little bit of walking for treasure. That's not a bad deal at all. After 100 over miles of driving, you come to a point where the road ends, and it's forest, and it's dark. Then you start trudging your way through the forest, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't know that the next 30 miles is going to be 30 miles of forest. But you're like, okay, I'm already like over 100 miles following this map. I'm just going to follow this through the forest. And according to my Google Maps, this is just about what it looks like over here. So I think I'm headed the right way. I'm going to keep on heading through the forest. By a certain time, you were like, I think we got to take a break. We're not going to get a treasure today. But it seems like we only have another 5 miles. So let's just camp here for tonight. Fortunately, we brought some supplies and we'll continue the journey tomorrow. So tomorrow is a new day. You wake up here in the forest. Fortunately, you didn't get kidnapped by anyone. You didn't get mugged. You didn't have any animals attack you. You didn't get stung by scorpions or rampaged by wild bears. And you're technically fine. You're just kind of tired from the 30 miles of trekking through the forest. And the next day, you follow this journey into what seems to be a barren land, way past the forest. You just about arrived at the spot marked out on the map, only to find that you're there, and you can confirm this on your Google Maps. This definitely seems like the right spot. I've even checked the latitude, longitude. I'm definitely right here unless my GPS is malfunctioning, but there's nothing here. That can only mean one thing. So after the 100 over miles of driving, the 30 over miles of forest, spending a night, walking 5 miles on barren land, you found a spot in the ground, and if everything is exactly as the person who told you, the treasure is right there, and you probably have to dig. But how wide of an area are you going to dig? You don't know, because that spot on the map, it could be a radius of 1 meter, 5 meters, 10 meters. We don't know, but it's definitely there. So at this point, what do? You're thinking to yourself, I spent hours driving out here, more hours making the way through the forest, more time making out to this spot right here. After all that is worth, there's treasure. But right now, I would have to get digging equipment, and I'll probably have to get a lot of digging equipment. Maybe not just myself. Maybe I need a team. At this point, if you decide to give up, you don't gain anything. And the person who gave you the map doesn't have his 5% share either. But more importantly, you just wasted over a day and you have nothing to show for it. What I'm trying to tell you right here is that a lot of the things that we want for ourselves in life are just like the challenges that we will go through in order to receive the big pot of treasure or the big dungeon of loot and treasure. But if we do not take the efforts to go there, if we decide to give up halfway, for example, if you followed the map, you ended up at that digging spot, you went back to the guy who gave you the map and say, hey, I demand half my compensation because I was already right at the spot, just that I didn't get the loot. But then again, the guy says, I never said I could give you compensation for this. But if you do get there, because you spent the time and effort to get there, all I ask is 5% of what you managed to recover from there, and I'm happy with that. You can take the rest. The point here is that if you do not do the required, even if you are 1 meter away from the goal, if you have dug but not dug deep enough, if you've traveled but not yet to the spot, if you have endured hardships, maybe even getting chased by wild boars, hyenas, and wild bears in the forest, but you didn't get to the treasure spot, you didn't dig, how will you get your reward? could go on to a separate whole lecture about entitled behavior, but that is not the topic for today. The point I want to bring forward is how badly do you want a goal enough to see it through to the completion? A lot of today's Gen Z people, or maybe even before that, the Gen Ys, the Gen X. I would say the Gen X is still a little bit more daring, but the Gen Ys and Zs, there are a lot of pushover people with entitled mindsets that I've come across that are just not willing to put in the hardships for the rewards that they seek. If we compare this to the labors of our forefathers, for example, I was born in Singapore. My maternal grandpa traded rice. My paternal grandfather did some currency exchange. They worked pretty hard. Take some time to ask, what did your ancestors do for a living as well? If any of you have received some benefit from a will left behind by a grandparent, let's look into what they did back then. How much sacrifice did they do to provide a livelihood for your parents, your grandparents? Especially for Asians, no matter rich or poor, it is a pride and joy to be able to continue the ancestry, to continue the bloodline. Back in the day, if you didn't have a job, you just had to create the job. If there wasn't an opportunity, you just had to create the opportunity. But in today's context, most people just take for granted job security. But even if that is the premise of today's person, in order to hold the security of your job, doesn't that entail that you have to do some specific actions on a daily basis? That is your job scope. And if you fail to do this job scope, you face getting fired, losing your job, getting retrenched, getting replaced. Another message I want to share with you today is that if you plan to win big, follow the plan, and there your reward will be. There is no failure, only delays. For example, continuing this fictitious story, if you went to that spot where the treasure was marked as, if the money that you could stand to gain was in the tens or even hundreds of millions. But the only thing is that you don't know just how much treasure is there. It could be billions, but you don't know until you find out. What things could go through your mind? Could you be telling yourself, what if it's just a couple of thousand? What if it's 1 million? What if it's not worth any more for the cost of me to hire a digging team to bring in equipment? And these are the thoughts that plague most people of today. When you encourage any of your friends into entrepreneurship, or maybe even if your friends try to talk to you about entrepreneurship, either you or your friends are talking each other out. Already, you or your friends are justifying why you shouldn't do something. Well, let's suppose you got to that spot. You drove the journey, you cleared the forest, you went to the barren land, you got to that treasure spot on the map. You're like, fuck this is way too difficult. I'm not gonna get digging equipment. I'm not gonna make my way out there. In fact, you know what? I'm just gonna call for some help from this spot. Wherever I can get help, I'm gonna just hitch a ride on and forget about everything. I'm gonna even leave the car that I rented back at a spot, whatever. I don't care anymore. And on the way out, you pass this map to someone else. Hey, there's treasure back there if you care, but I don't. This map is yours. You don't have to give me anything. A few days later, the person that you gave a map to shows up in the newspaper. He has unraveled billions of dollars of rare metal and jewelry that's been left there for God knows how long. And the haul was just so great that the newspapers around the world had to cover it. This guy is now the latest multi-billionaire. You try to contact this guy, and the guy that gave you the map is also asking you, what happened? Why did you get it? Who's this guy? And this guy is way too busy getting press interviews, and he doesn't even know who you are, because as a new crowned billionaire, he is just way too cautious of who's approaching him. But the truth of the matter also, that you don't know that this person who became the latest multi-billionaire also spent considerable time, considerable effort, and so happened he knew the right people, he had the right equipment, he made a nice plan, and he didn't just get this in a couple of hours, but through careful planning of how to drill, where to drill, and at the same time to make plans of the land's structural safety. Because if you're digging multiple spots, the worst thing that could happen is that everyone just falls into a pit, never to be rescued again. So everything was very carefully planned. It was strategically being dug, just like how a hairstylist very strategically cuts different parts of your hair. In that same way, they did the digging. And because when they dug, they also met with some tough resistance. They even had to have a helicopter bring in some special drilling bit that was able to break through that tough rock. It was like some kind of a metal ore. If you knew that you needed some expertise, if you knew you needed some equipment, and you found ways to get the expertise, the equipment, to do the right planning, this could have been yours. As long as you didn't expect to get rich in a single day, but over a period of time. Because what the heck, even if it was a couple of 100,000, wouldn't that have been worth it? But if you simply give up, what is there to gain? Nothing. It doesn't matter how close you are to the goal, the finishing line, the success point. Even if you stop 100 meters short, heck, even 50 meters short, heck, if you fainted before the finish line, just half a meter away, you technically did not finish the race. You do not pass go, you do not collect $200 in Monopoly terms. Fun fact, even this fitness body that I have right now, in the fittest shape of my life, I still cannot jump as high as I want to jump. I've been aiming to be able to slam dunk. I still can't do that. I still even can't touch the rim. I'm a short Asian guy. But in the process of getting that close to it, now I can even do a 1 foot jump and touch my ceiling. That's basically to be able to do the height of a 2 foot jump. Like when I first started out, even with 2 feet, it took me like half a year or 1 year of training to even scrape the ceiling with my fingernails. But now I can touch the ceiling for 1 foot jump. So it's the process as well. Of course the goal is important, but in the process of getting to the goal, you become a much stronger, much more capable person. If you're an anime fan, look at how Sung Jin-woo in Solo Leveling became so much of a stronger person just because he wanted to survive and refused to quit. Or should I say, he wanted to live enough to not quit. Another anime, Ari Fureta, is the same. The guy fell into bottom pits. Every one of his schoolmates thought that he died. In actual fact, over a period of months, fighting for his life in a very limited space, feeding off of wild beasts, he gradually obtained powers and became a master alchemist and superhero. Just how committed are you in achieving the goals that you truly want? Another interesting perspective for you. I know many of you have heard of the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And in recent years, many people have done exposés to show that he never actually really had real wealth until the success of his book and his book franchise. He even was quoted as saying the book Rich Dad Poor Dad was written because he created a game called Cash Flow and was not selling it well. The book was like a catalyst for the game to sell. And then the book took off on a life of its own with the help of a trained accountant, Sharon Lecter. That's when his book, that was kind of like a rough diamond, became polished enough to become such a book of influence around the world. Not only that, he also admitted this so-called rich dad was just like a figment of imagination. People call this fact like, what a fraud. But what if we wanted this high goal? It could be achieving a salary, it could be getting your dream house, your dream car, that by your current standards seem impossible, elusive, far away. What if we did just what Rich Dad Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki did? Imagine that he had a rich dad, and what would this rich dad be saying? If you had an advisor, your imaginary assistant constantly giving you advice and suggestions. Hey, if you want this, do this. If you want this, do this. Stop doing this. Do this instead. And you gradually start to tune yourself to the person worthy of the success that you seek. As long as you stick with the plan, as long as you follow the map, you will get there. In terms of manifestation, sometimes we cannot even see, we don't even have a map, that we just have to imagine what does that finishing point that we want to be at looks like. What would it be to be in that space? If we can take this back a couple of times, like what are some points of an imaginary map? What are some of the milestones that we have to reach in order to get closer and closer to this goal and do these things? The final goal, of course, is far away and hard to perceive, but not as hard as the one before that, the one before that, the one before that, and the one closest to now. And each time we improve, we level up, and it gives us even more confidence to make the next climb, the next climb, the next climb, and that final push for success. A man with a dream will not be denied. A man with a dream will do great things because he will not be denied. For another video, watch this one over here.